Gregory Abernathy closed the leather folder, and Audrey's two older brothers barely concealed their smirks. They had just secured a $12 million estate, a sprawling mansion, and a massive stock portfolio. Audrey? She inherited 40 acres of worthless, rocky dirt. Or at least, that is what everyone in the room thought. The rain lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Gregory Abernathy's downtown Boston law office matched the heavy, suffocating mood inside the room. The mahogany-paneled walls seemed to press inward, smelling of lemon polish, old leather, and decades of guarded secrets. At the center of the room sat Audrey Gallagher. She wore a faded navy cardigan and stared blankly at her intertwined fingers, the skin around her nails raw and bitten. She was exhausted. For the past 3 years, she had been the sole caretaker for her father. Harrison Gallagher, a retired shipping magnate whose iron will was eventually broken by a brutal wasting illness. Sitting across from her, completely untouched by the grief that hung over Audrey, were her two older brothers, Arthur and Leonard. Arthur, the eldest, checked his phone with a look of profound boredom. He was dressed in a bespoke charcoal Italian suit that cost more than Audrey's car. He had spent the last 3 years in Monaco and Aspen, entirely absent from their father's decline, claiming his investments required his constant supervision. Leonard, the middle child, sat beside Arthur, drumming his fingers impatiently on the glass table. Leonard had always been Arthur's shadow, a sycophant who spent his life waiting for his trust fund to mature while contributing nothing to the family legacy. Neither brother had visited Harrison in his final 6 months. Neither had answered Audrey's desperate phone calls when the at-home hospice care bills exceeded her modest salary as a pediatric nurse. Audrey had drained her own meager savings and maxed out 3 credit cards to ensure their father died with dignity, surrounded by clean sheets, proper medication, and someone who loved him. Gregory Abernathy, a silver-haired attorney who had managed Harrison's affairs for 30 years, cleared his throat. He looked deeply uncomfortable. He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and opened the heavy ivory folder containing Harrison Gallagher's last will and testament. "We are gathered to execute the final wishes of Harrison Thomas Gallagher," Abernathy began, his voice gravelly and formal. "I will skip the standard legal preamble, as per Harrison's instructions, and move directly to the distribution of assets." Arthur finally put his phone away, leaning forward with a predatory gleam in his eye. Leonard mirrored the movement. Audrey just closed her eyes, wishing she were back home with her 7-year-old daughter, Lily. "To my eldest son Arthur," Abernathy read, his eyes fixed firmly on the paper, "I leave the Gallagher estate in Brookline, including the manor, the grounds, and all antiquities housed within. Furthermore, I leave to Arthur my controlling shares in Gallagher Logistics." Arthur let out a quiet, satisfied exhale. The Brookline estate alone was worth at least $8.5 million. The logistics shares would pay out dividends in the high 6 figures annually. "To my second son, Leonard," Abernathy continued, "I leave the entirety of my liquid stock portfolio, the offshore trust established in the Cayman Islands, and the collection of vintage automobiles housed at the secondary garage." Leonard pumped his fist subtly, a wide grin breaking across his face. "Finally," he whispered to Arthur, who gave him a brief, congratulatory nod. Audrey felt a lump form in her throat. She didn't care about yachts or offshore trusts. She just needed enough to pay off the crushing $40,000 in medical debt she had accumulated caring for their father, and maybe a little extra to set up a college fund for Lily. Harrison had always told her, right up until he lost his speech, "I see what you're doing for me, Audrey. You will be taken care of. I promise you." Abernathy shifted in his leather chair. He looked up from the document, meeting Audrey's eyes with an expression that looked distressingly like pity. He swallowed hard. "And to my daughter, Audrey," Abernathy read, his voice dropping a fraction of an octave, "who stayed by my side when the others found better places to be. I leave Tract 42. Silence descended on the room. The rain outside seemed to suddenly sound incredibly loud against the glass. Audrey blinked. "Tract 42? She echoed softly. "Mr. Abernathy, what is Tract 42? Arthur let out a sudden, bark-like laugh. "You've got to be kidding me," he chuckled, leaning back and crossing his legs. "The Danvers lot?" Leonard began to snicker. "Oh, that is classic Dad. Absolutely ruthless." Audrey looked between her brothers and the lawyer, panic beginning to flutter in her chest. "I don't understand. What is the Danvers lot?" Abernathy sighed, removing his glasses. "Tract 42 is a 40-acre parcel of undeveloped land on the outskirts of Danvers, just off Route 114. Your father acquired it in a foreclosure settlement in the late 1980s. It is completely barren, Audrey. It's unzoned scrubland, rocky dirt mostly. It has no municipal utility hookups, and it sits in a precarious topographical dip, making it entirely unsuited for standard residential building." Audrey felt the blood drain from her face. "But the money for his treatments, I put it all on my cards. He told me I would be taken care of. Is there a cash sum? A trust?" "I'm so sorry, Audrey," Abernathy said gently. "This document is ironclad. He left you the deed to Tract 42 and nothing else." Arthur stood up, buttoning his suit jacket with a smirk. "Well, look at the bright side, sis. If you ever want to go camping in a ditch beside a highway, you won't have to pay for a permit." "Arthur, please," Audrey whispered, tears finally pricking her eyes. She stood up, her legs shaking. "You know how much debt I took on for Dad. I can't afford my rent next month. You just inherited millions. Could you just help me cover the hospice bills? It's 40,000. Arthur stopped at the door, looking back at her with eyes as cold and grey as a winter ocean. "Dad always rewarded competence, Audrey. He built an empire because he knew the value of things. If he left you a pile of dirt, it's because that's exactly what he thought your time was worth. You chose to play Florence Nightingale. Actions have consequences." Leonard offered a patronizing pout. "Better start planting potatoes, Audie." The heavy oak doors swung shut behind them, leaving Audrey alone with the lawyer, the rain, and the crushing realization that the father she had loved and sacrificed everything for had repaid her devotion with a wasteland. The next 6 months were a masterclass in survival and humiliation. Arthur and Leonard wasted no time flaunting their newly acquired wealth. Arthur threw a lavish, catered gala at the Brookline estate to celebrate his new chapter, pictures of which were splashed across Boston's high society pages. Leonard immediately liquidated the vintage car collection and bought a 90-foot yacht, moving to Miami. Neither of them answered Audrey's texts or calls. They formally instructed their lawyers to sever all communication with her. Meanwhile, Audrey was drowning. She picked up double shifts at the hospital, coming home with swollen feet and aching joints, only to sit at her cramped kitchen table and stare at the towering stack of past-due notices. The medical debt was suffocating her. One bleak Tuesday in November, driven by a morbid curiosity and a desperate hope that Abernathy had been wrong, Audrey drove out to Danvers to see her inheritance. She pulled her 10-year-old sedan onto the shoulder of Route 114. The wind howled off the highway, biting through her thin coat as she stepped out of the car. Tract 42 was exactly as the lawyer had described, perhaps even worse. It was a vast, depressing expanse of dead weeds, jagged grey rocks, and cracked earth. A rusted chain-link fence sagged along the perimeter, dotted with faded no trespassing signs. In the distance, someone had illegally dumped a pile of bald tires and a rotting sofa. The land sat in a slight geographic bowl, meaning any heavy rain would likely turn the center into a stagnant mud pit. Standing there at the edge of the property, the roar of passing semi-trucks drowning out her thoughts, Audrey finally broke down. She sank to her knees in the dry dirt and wept. She cried for the father who had lied to her, for the brothers who had abandoned her, and for the sheer, terrifying reality of her financial ruin. She picked up a handful of the cold grey dirt and let it slip through her fingers. It felt like ash. Winter came and went, bringing with it the threat of eviction. Audrey was seriously considering filing for bankruptcy when the unexpected happened. It was a Tuesday evening in early April. Audrey was in her tiny kitchen, helping Lily with her math homework over a dinner of boxed macaroni and cheese, when a sharp, authoritative knock rattled her apartment door. Audrey frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone, and her building didn't exactly get casual visitors. She looked through the peephole and saw a man standing in the hallway. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit that looked completely alien against the peeling yellow paint of the apartment corridor. Cautiously, she unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door a few inches, keeping the chain engaged. Yes, the man offered a polished, blindingly white smile. Audrey Gallagher? My name is Jonathan Pierce. I'm a senior acquisitions director with Horizon Development Group. I hope I'm not intruding. Audrey tightened her grip on the door. I'm not buying anything, and I don't have any money to invest. Oh, I'm not here to sell you anything, Ms. Gallagher, Pierce said smoothly, his eyes briefly sweeping over the cramped, shabby apartment before returning to her face. I'm here to buy something from you. May I come in? Reluctantly, Audrey unlatched the chain and let him into the small living room. Pierce remained standing, clutching a slim leather briefcase. He looked like a shark navigating a very small fish tank. I'll get right to the point, Ms. Gallagher, Pierce said, his tone dripping with practiced empathy. My firm specializes in acquiring distressed, unused or otherwise burdensome properties and rehabilitating the land for minor commercial use. Warehousing, mostly. We recently did a sweep of the Danvers area and noted that you are the sole deed holder of Tract 42 off Route 114. Audrey crossed her arms. The dirt field. Exactly, Pierce chuckled, though his eyes remained sharp and calculating. It's an eyesore, frankly, and we know that property taxes on 40 acres, even undeveloped scrubland, can be quite a burden. We'd like to take that headache off your hands. He opened his briefcase, retrieved a crisp manila folder, and placed it on Audrey's cheap laminate kitchen table. Horizon Development is prepared to offer you $50,000 in cash for the deed to Tract 42, Pierce said smoothly. We will cover all closing costs and legal fees. You sign the paper, and a wire transfer hits your account in 48 hours. Audrey stared at the folder. $50,000. It was exactly enough to wipe out the medical debt, pay off her credit cards, and put a small cushion in her checking account. It was a lifeline thrown directly to a drowning woman. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She reached out, her fingertips brushing the edge of the folder, but then she stopped. She looked up at Jonathan Pierce. Despite his relaxed posture, she noticed a faint sheen of sweat on his forehead. She noticed how tightly his fingers were gripping the handle of his briefcase. He was trying to look casual, but there was an electric, vibrating tension radiating from him. Audrey had spent her entire life watching her father conduct business from the background. Harrison Gallagher had been a ruthless negotiator. He used to tell her, "If a man in a suit knocks on your door, offering to solve your problems, it's because you're standing on the solution to his." 50,000, Audrey repeated slowly, pulling her hand back from the folder. "For a barren dirt field that you claim is just a headache, it is a generous offer, well above market value for unzoned land," Pierce assured her, though his smile tightened a fraction of an inch. "We factor in the convenience." "No," Audrey said quietly. Pierce blinked, clearly thrown off script. "I'm sorry." "I said no," Audrey replied, standing taller. "If it's worthless, you wouldn't have sent a senior acquisitions director to a run-down apartment building at 7 o'clock at night to hand me a check. You would have mailed a letter." Pierce let out a short, breathy laugh. "Miss Gallagher, I assure you, you are overthinking this. It's a standard corporate acquisition. Let me make this easier for you." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a silver pen. 75,000, right now. You can clear your debts tonight." The fact that he knew she had debts sent a chill down Audrey's spine. "They looked into me. They know I'm desperate." "I want you to leave," Audrey said, stepping toward the door and opening it. Pierce's polished demeanor instantly vanished. The fake empathy evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard urgency. He stepped closer to the table, slamming his hand flat against the manila folder. 200,000, Pierce said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. $200,000, Miss Gallagher. Do you have any idea how many hours you have to work at Boston General to see that kind of money? Don't be foolish. Sign the paper. Audrey's breath caught in her throat. $200,000. 4 times his initial offer, conjured out of thin air within 3 minutes of conversation. Her father hadn't left her a pile of dirt. He had left her a loaded gun, and she didn't even know what it was aimed at. "Get out of my apartment," Audrey commanded, her voice shaking with adrenaline. "Before I call the police." Pierce stared at her for a long, heavy moment. The shark had completely dropped its disguise. He snatched the folder off the table and stormed out into the hallway. As Audrey moved to slam the door, she heard Pierce pulling out his cell phone. Before the latch clicked shut, she caught a single, frantic sentence echoing down the corridor. "She rejected the 200, Mr. Caldwell. Yes, I know. If we don't get the Danvers tracked by the end of the month, the entire bypass project is dead." Audrey locked the deadbolt and leaned against the door, her heart pounding furiously against her ribs. The bypass project. She walked over to her laptop, opened it, and began to search. It was time to find out exactly what her father had hidden in the dirt. The blue light of the laptop screen illuminated Audrey's determined face. She quickly typed the words Danvers Bypass Project and Caldwell into the search engine. Instantly, dozens of articles flooded the screen. Richard Caldwell was a titan of New England real estate, a billionaire developer known for aggressive tactics and deep political connections. For 5 years, Caldwell had been secretly lobbying the State Transportation Board to approve a massive commercial logistics hub just north of Danvers. To make the hub viable, the state needed to build a new highway bypass connecting Interstate 95 directly to Route 114. Audrey pulled up the proposed zoning maps. Her breath hitched. The entire massive billion-dollar highway expansion required a straight path through a specific valley to avoid protected wetlands. Right in the middle of that narrow valley, acting as an unavoidable geographic choke point, was Tract 42. Her 40 acres of useless dirt. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the glowing monitor. The sheer magnitude of the discovery washed over her in freezing waves. This single, barren plot of land held the absolute power to dictate the future of an entire metropolitan infrastructure. Without her land, the state could not build the bypass. Without the bypass, Caldwell's logistics hub, a project projected to generate hundreds of millions in annual revenue, was completely dead in the water. Her father had known. Harrison Gallagher, the shipping magnate who built his empire by anticipating the logistics market, had foreseen the zoning expansion. He had purchased that worthless dip of land decades ago, knowing that eventually the state would have to build through it. The next morning, Audrey's phone rang. It was an unknown number, but she answered it. "Audrey, darling." Arthur's voice boomed through the speaker, dripping with artificial warmth. "It has been far too long. Leonard and I were just talking about you. We feel terrible about how things ended at the lawyer's office. We want to make it right. How about we buy that old Danvers lot from you for a cool $500,000? Audrey gripped the edge of her kitchen counter. Horizon Development must be a shell company for Caldwell, and when they failed to secure the deed cheaply, rumors must have leaked to her brother's elite social circles. "You want to buy the dirt field?" Audrey asked, keeping her voice perfectly flat. "Just as a favor to our little sister," Leonard shouted in the background. "The price is $10 million, Arthur," Audrey said coldly. Dead silence on the line. Then Arthur's voice dropped its friendly facade, turning venomous. "You little fool. You don't know what you are playing with. That land is ours by right. Dad was out of his mind when he wrote that will. We are filing an injunction this afternoon to contest your inheritance based on mental incompetence. You won't see a single dime." The line went dead. Audrey stared at her phone, her hands shaking. Her brothers were coming for her. She needed a lawyer, but she had no money. She remembered Gregory Abernathy, her father's attorney. He had looked so guilty reading the will. Audrey drove straight to his downtown Boston office, bypassing his secretary and marching directly into his grand private office. "Arthur and Leonard are contesting the will," Audrey stated, slamming her hands on his desk. "They know about the bypass. Did you know?" Abernathy sighed, removing his glasses. "I knew your father believed the land was valuable, Audrey. I did not know about Caldwell's aggressive timeline, but I know this. Your father left it to you for a specific reason." "They are claiming he was mentally incompetent," Audrey said, her voice cracking. "I have $40,000 in medical debt, Mr. Abernathy. I cannot fight a protracted legal battle against multimillionaires. Caldwell's people are already harassing me. I need your help. Pro bono." Abernathy looked at the desperate, fierce woman standing before him. He saw flashes of Harrison's legendary tenacity in her eyes. He slowly nodded. "Sit down, Audrey. Let's prepare for war." The Suffolk County Courthouse felt like a modern gladiator arena. Arthur and Leonard sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by a team of 3 expensive corporate litigators in matching pinstriped suits. They looked incredibly smug. Across the aisle, Audrey sat beside Abernathy, wearing her only formal dress, clutching a worn leather notebook that used to belong to her father. The high-vaulted ceilings echoed with the murmurs of the gallery. This was the final battle. The brothers' lead attorney, a slick man named Jonathan Geller, paced before the judge. He adjusted his expensive silk tie and began his opening statement with practiced theatricality. "Your Honor, in his final months, Harrison Gallagher suffered from severe physical decline, which inevitably clouded his cognitive judgment. Leaving a massive corporate estate to his sons while bequeathing a worthless plot of industrial scrubland to his beloved daughter is clear evidence of a fractured mind. We seek to invalidate the final codicil and distribute Tract 42 evenly among the siblings. Audrey felt a surge of nausea. Geller was twisting her father's tragic decline into a weapon against her. She glanced at Arthur, who was busy inspecting his manicured fingernails, looking supremely confident. Leonard was whispering a joke to one of the junior lawyers. They truly believed they had already won. Abernathy stood up very slowly, carefully smoothing the front of his modest suit. He did not pace. He stood firmly behind his desk, projecting an aura of unshakable calm. Your Honor, the plaintiffs assert that Harrison Gallagher was mentally incompetent, yet just 8 months ago, when Mr. Arthur Gallagher and Mr. Leonard Gallagher received millions of dollars and controlling shares in Gallagher Logistics, they happily signed sworn affidavits declaring their father was of perfectly sound mind and body. Abernathy tapped his tablet, and the signed affidavits were projected onto the large courtroom screen. Arthur's smug expression instantly faltered. The judge peered down at the screen, his eyebrows raised slowly. Furthermore, Abernathy continued, his gravelly voice echoing in the silent room, walking toward the witness stand, where a representative from the State Transportation Board sat, subpoenaed just 2 days prior. We will demonstrate that Tract 42 is not, in fact, worthless scrubland. It is the undisputed linchpin of the massive Route 114 bypass. 114 saw. The courtroom erupted into a frenzy of murmurs. Geller shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. Relevance. We are here to discuss the testator's mental capacity, not zoning geography. Overruled, the judge barked, leaning forward. I'm very interested in hearing this zoning geography, Mr. Abernathy. Proceed. Abernathy turned to face Arthur directly again. Is it not true, Arthur, that you recently met with Richard Caldwell to negotiate the sale of this specific land, assuming you could seize it from your sister today? Arthur's face turned a violent shade of crimson. He gripped the edge of his wooden table. That is a private business matter. It has absolutely nothing to do with my father's declining mental state. It is a matter of immense greed, Abernathy countered smoothly. He walked back to his desk and picked up the worn leather notebook Audrey had been holding. Your Honor, I submit into evidence the personal journal of Harrison Gallagher. In it, he details a fierce, decades-long and bitter feud with Richard Caldwell, dating back to 1998. Caldwell attempted a hostile takeover of Gallagher Logistics. Harrison bought Tract 42, specifically to block Caldwell's future expansion plans. Abernathy opened the journal to a dog-eared page. He wrote, and I quote, Arthur and Leonard are weak. They will sell out to Caldwell for the first check he waves in their faces. Audrey is the only one with the spine to hold the line. She will know what to do with the dirt. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Audrey felt hot tears stream down her face. Her father had not abandoned her. He had not punished her. He had completely trusted her. He knew she was the only one strong enough to win this final brutal game of chess. He knew she would fight hard. The judge slammed his large, heavy wooden gavel down hard. Case dismissed. The will stands exactly as written. The deed belongs solely and irrevocably to Audrey Gallagher. Outside the courtroom, the heavy double doors swung open into the bright, airy marble hallway. Richard Caldwell himself was waiting. He stepped directly in front of Audrey, blocking her path. A checkbook was already in his hand. He looked absolutely furious, but incredibly desperate. The bypass was slipping through his fingers. 12 million, Ms. Gallagher. Right now. You win. Take the check and walk away, Caldwell demanded firmly. Audrey looked at the billionaire developer. Then she looked past his shoulder at her 2 brothers, who were trailing behind, looking absolutely devastated. Arthur had heavily leveraged his inheritance on risky margin trades. fully assuming he would double his net worth with the bypass deal once he stole the land. Without it, he was completely financially ruined. Leonard looked equally pale and sick. "Mr. Caldwell," Audrey said, her clear voice echoing loudly in the expansive marble hall, "I am not selling my land to you. Not today, not ever. I just had a very productive phone call with the governor's office. The state wants to avoid a private monopoly on the new logistics hub." Caldwell's jaw dropped in absolute shock. "You cannot do that. The state will not pay you a fraction of what I can." "Actually," Abernathy interjected, stepping up beside Audrey with a very rare, genuine smile on his weathered face. "Due to the strategic commercial value of the valley and the massive public bidding war you inadvertently initiated, the state has officially agreed to a sum of $28 million to secure the public development." Audrey turned her back on her ruined brothers and the defeated billionaire. She walked proudly out of the courthouse into the bright Boston sunlight, finally free, incredibly and undeniably completely victorious. If you loved this incredible real-life story of betrayal, hidden secrets, and ultimate redemption, please hit that like button right now. Do not forget to share this video with your friends and family so they can experience this dramatic journey too. Subscribe to our channel today for more thrilling, suspenseful, and deeply satisfying tales delivered straight to your feed every single week. Leave a comment below telling us what you would do in Audrey's shoes. Thank you for watching.